Good Vach, Shavua Tov. Good evening. It's great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. What a wonderful way to start the week and get a mitzvah under our belts. The mitzvah, the commandment of Torah learning right away at the top of the week. A wonderful thing. Let's light up the darkness. New wisdom candle. We've gone through a lot of these in our 1,693 pages together. Who's in the house on a Saturday night? Joe in the Inland Empire, Shandora in the Bronx, Bella in Florida, Melissa in Great Neck, John in Maine, Chaim in Florida, Sharon in New Jersey, Aoife in Florida, Joseph in Nevada, Ella's in the house. Welcome, everybody. It's a short daf. I'm going to share a very quick teaching that really moved me today. And I actually heard the first part of it twice. First, I heard it from Nina, who brought it down from Rabbi Avigdor Miller. And then actually three times. And then I read it when I read the Parsha a little later, and Rashi brought it down. And then Rabbi Luria shared it with us at the third meal when I went back to Shul. So this idea that in the Parsha that we just read, the Eschanan, incredible Torah portion that includes Moses' repetition of the Ten Commandments in the book of Deuteronomy, and the Shema, the great declaration, the most basic prayer of Judaism, that God is one. Kind of often overlooked verse in this Torah portion is this idea that Moses, here at the end of his life, and he's already been told that he cannot enter the promised land with the children of Israel, that Joshua will lead them in. And what does he do? What's the first action that he takes, after being told that he won't enter, and he prays that Joshua will be a good leader? But the first thing he does, action that he takes, is that he establishes 3 cities of refuge on the east of the Jordan River. Now, ultimately, there would be 6 cities of refuge. These were 6 of the 48 Levite cities. The Levites didn't get portions in the land like the other tribes. They got cities. 6 of the 48 cities were designated cities of refuge. And this was a place where if somebody through some kind of negligence, not hatred, not a desire to kill, but through some kind of negligent action, possibly accidental, possibly negligent, but because they did this and somebody else died, and it's a sort of action where because of that death, there would be an avenger of blood, meaning the family members of the victim would say, no, that guy's a murderer, and they want to go kill him. So this person can flee to a city of refuge, and he'll be safe there from the avenger of blood until the next high priest, so the current high priest passes away and the next one is appointed. Now, the 6 cities of refuge sort of functioned as a unit, that until there were 6, there were none, all or nothing. So when Moses designated these 3 cities on the east of the Jordan, where the people were before they were going to enter the promised land, it was an incomplete action, right? Those 3 could not start acting as cities of refuge until the other 3 cities on the west side of the Jordan would be designated as such, which would only be done by Joshua in the book of Joshua once the people entered the land. So Moses took this action that by itself was seemingly meaningless. And about this, the Gemara in Tractate Makos says, and Rashi brings it down, that Moses was greedy, that Moses wanted kesef, right? So the idea that a person who is attracted to money will never be satisfied with money. It's never going to be enough. And it says this about Moses. Now, we know that Moses, he actually was a wealthy man because he was, it's another teaching for another day, that he was able to keep just the trimmings that fell off when the tablets were carved and other things like that. God just arranged for him so that he wouldn't have to worry about money since he was busy leading the people 24 hours a day. But that's not the kind of money that Moses was greedy for. What he was greedy, because what's money? Money is something that when you die, it's meaningless. You can't take it with you. It goes to your heirs, and who knows what they're going to use it for. What's meaningful are mitzvahs, right? What can you take with you? The money you gave away, the money you gave to charity, the shelter and clothing and food you provided for others, the Torah learning that you did, like thank God we're doing right now, the prayers that you prayed that are part of your obligation, the blessings that you uttered that were parts of your obligations, every commandment that you fulfill in this world. That's what you can take with you and will stand you well in the next world. And Moses understood the tremendous value of even a partial mitzvah, right? Even the fact that he couldn't complete that mitzvah of designating the cities of refuge, but at least he could start. At least he could do his part. At least he could show Joshua how he went about designating those cities so that Joshua would know how to do it when he entered the land. But any mitzvah that comes your way sees that opportunity and how special that we're doing this right now. As soon as the week begins, especially my people on the East Coast, I'm always in awe of you. You're learning past midnight. Amazing. So Rabbi Luria told a story, a true story, that really brings us down, like amazing in a way that I'm never going to forget it. True story. So there was a fellow, I think he was a Holocaust survivor, so he came out of Europe, ended up raising a family in America. Never became a hugely rich person, but had a nice home, was able to send his kids and his grandchildren to school to get an education. They made a life, an American dream. They made a life in America. And when he passed away, there was just a very small estate because really so much had been spent on the education of the children and grandchildren. But there was something in the bank, and the daughter went to collect it. And then the manager at the bank said, oh, your father not only had a bank account here, he also had a safe deposit box. Opened the safe deposit box. There was some jewelry from the mom or the grandma in Europe, a few other odds and ends. And there were 15 $1 bills. Why were there 15 $1 bills? Unexplained. Somebody asked, were they Chabad? Were these dollars received from the Lubavitcher Rebbe? No, they were just dollar bills. They really didn't know what it was. So the daughter ended up taking the 15 $1 bills, put them in a drawer, and they just sat there over the years. And from time to time when somebody would come, a workman, somebody making a delivery, they wanted to give a tip. She ended up giving away some of these dollar bills as tips to workers. And then there was only one left. And then she was older and told the story to her daughter. And the daughter said, Mom, there must be something about these dollar bills. There's one left. Let me see it. So she took the dollar bill. It looked like a regular dollar bill, but she did the research and found out that numismatically, for coin collectors, money collectors, there was something unusual about that dollar. It was some kind of error in the serial number that made it very rare. Long story short, that $1 bill was worth $25,000, and presumably all the other dollars that had been given away unknowingly to people who received them and didn't know what they'd gotten were probably also worth $25,000 each. The Zaidi, right, the grandfather, he had known that was something valuable that would grow in value over time. He put them away, but the daughter did not know. So Rabbi Luria said from that story, we have three important takeaways. Number one, if something is valuable to your father, to your mother, to your grandfather, to your grandmother, take it seriously. If it's valuable to them, even though maybe you don't understand it now, maybe you'll come to understand it later. Right? He put the 15 $1 bills in a safe deposit box. There must have been a reason. Even if you can't figure out what that reason is, treasure that because there's something to it. Even if you can't understand it now, you might understand it later. What was valuable to Moses? The opportunity to do a mitzvah, even if he couldn't do the complete mitzvah. Learn from that. People who leave a trip early because they want to make sure that they catch a Torah lecture. People who who go play their golf game later so that they can do the morning prayers with talis and tefillin. You know, they value what's important and learn from them. People you respect, if they value something, you know, give it its due. Number 2, understand that things don't always show their value immediately. It might take till much later. And likewise to yourself, you know, coming a little bit early, coming a little late to a prayer session, getting to a Torah class a minute early, a minute late, doesn't seem like such a big difference. Yeah, but up there in the next world, in the world to come, that's where the true value of things is known. And maybe we won't know the value of the good deeds that we do in this world. Maybe we won't see the outcome. You know, if our ancestors are telling us that something is valuable, know that it is so. And even if we won't see the outcome of that investment of time, effort, dedication in the near term, we'll see it in the long term. And finally, says Rabbi Luria, tell your kids. The gentleman should have told his daughter, these are important $1 bills, so she would have known what they were. And likewise, if you're going to study some Torah, tell your kids, hey, I'm going to go study some Torah because it's important to me. I'm going to shul because it's important. We're having a Shabbos dinner because it's important. Tell your kids what your values are so they see how valuable it is to you. Obviously, you have to model the behavior, but sometimes on top of demonstrating and modeling the behavior, it's also good to tell your kids what's important and why it's important to you, and that will help transmit those values to the next generation. Okay, that's what I wanted to share because I was moved by it. Our daf tonight is page 59 here in Tractate Bava Basra, the 23rd volume of the Talmud. We're going to continue and, God willing, complete our discussion of Mishnah number 7, open Mishnah number 8 as well. And even, are we going to get to Mishnah 9 as well? Okay, short daf, short, quick Mishnahs here toward the end of the chapter. So, the Mishnah teaches with regard to an Egyptian ladder, and here Mishnah number 7 was talking about whether somebody gets an acquired privilege to drain water into the neighbor's courtyard, to have a window open into the courtyard, to use a ladder or a set of steps. If you know, can you keep using it? Do you acquire a privilege even though it's on your neighbor's property, sort of like an easement? So the Mishnah teaches that with regard to an Egyptian ladder, which is small and portable, one has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. And the Gemara asks, what is an Egyptian ladder like? And the members of the school of Rabbi Yanai say it is any ladder that does not have 4 rungs. A very short ladder, like a step stool. So that's too small to be significant, and even though you've been using it, you can't acquire a right to use it. And the Mishnah teaches that with regard to an Egyptian window, which one has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use. Same idea. Egyptian ladder, Egyptian window, both are insignificant. A short ladder and a tiny window. So Gemara asks an interesting question. So what's different about an Egyptian ladder that the Mishnah does not explain what it is? And what is different with regard to an Egyptian window where the Mishnah does tell us that it's a very small window that you can't even stick your head through? Why does it define the Egyptian window, but the Mishnah did not define the Egyptian ladder? And the Gemara answers, it was necessary for the Mishnah to state the definition of an Egyptian window according to the unattributed opinion of the Mishnah, because it wants to cite the dissenting opinion of Rabbi Yehuda in that latter clause. Now, with regard to windows, Rabbi Zera says if one built a large window at a height that is lower than 4 cubits from the ground, so about 6 feet, so he has the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, and therefore his neighbor can protest the initial construction of the window. Meaning, we share a courtyard, and I just have a wall between my house and, one of the walls of my house faces that courtyard. And I decide I would like to put a window in that wall. Now, if I do, I'm going to reduce your privacy when you're in the courtyard, and perhaps your privacy when I'm looking through my window over at your house. If you don't protest when I open that window, and I keep using it, then I'm going to acquire that privilege of having the window open into the courtyard, and you will have lost your opportunity to object. You need to object when I build it. Some say you have to object right when I build it, and if you don't, then I get to keep using it. And some say I'm going to have to keep that window there for 3 years without you objecting, and then acquire the privilege of keeping that window open on the courtyard. So if I have the possibility of you protesting, I also have the possibility of me acquiring a privilege in it if you don't protest. And that's regarding a window that is less than 6 cubits from the ground. 4 cubits, which is 6 feet, right? So Rabbi Zera says, if one built a large window at a height that is lower than 4 cubits from the ground, he has the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, and therefore his neighbor can protest the initial construction of the window. But if one built a large window at a height that is above 4 cubits from the ground, then he has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, and therefore his neighbor cannot protest its construction. And Rabbi Ilya says, even if it is built at a height that is above 4 cubits from the ground, he has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, but nevertheless his neighbor can protest its construction. It's a funny thing. What does it mean? If you have no ability to acquire the privilege, that means that you can be told to shut that window even long after you built it. Why? Because when it's a certain height looking down into the courtyard, it gives me too much of a vantage over the courtyard, interferes with your privacy too much. And that's why I can never have an absolute right to have that window, even if you don't protest at the outset. Now the Gemara asks, shall we say that they disagree with regard to whether there is coercion concerning conduct characteristic of Sodom? Right, so what is that? The characteristic behavior of the Sodomites, the people of Sodom. This has nothing to do with sexuality and the word that sodomite is often used. Here what we're talking about is if I can do something on my property that benefits me and doesn't impact you at all, but you're going to object anyway, then you would be behaving with the behavior characteristic of the people of Sodom. And what's an example of that? In other words, if I open a window that's simply going to allow light into my house and is not going to interfere with your privacy at all, like if it's a window very high up near high off the ground from the floor of my house, so all I can do is see the sky through it, even though it's in the wall, not the ceiling. All it's going to do is allow light to come in. Now it is facing the courtyard, but it's like so high up that I can't look through that window. It's only for the purposes of allowing light. But we've said that if it's going to interfere with your privacy at all, you can object to me having that window. So if you object, I'm not going to be able to have light in my house just because the window is facing the courtyard, even though there's no way I can look through that window into the courtyard. So you raising that objection would be like being petty and mean and interfering with the enjoyment of my house. It's a legal right that you have, but taking that right, exercising that right, would be deemed selfish and petty, and the court might coerce you to not raise that objection, right? So now, does everyone agree with that? So perhaps their dispute is with regard to a circumstance where one will not suffer any loss while the other one gains some benefit, and the former desires to prevent the latter from gaining that benefit. If the former is coerced into not being evil without reason and consequently allows the latter to benefit, counter to the behavior of the residents of Sodom. So in other words, you have that right, but you shouldn't exercise it, and the question is, will the court force you to not be like a Sodomite? So one sage, Rabbi Zera, holds that there is coercion. We tell the people, don't behave that way, and therefore the neighbor who does not suffer any damage from a high window cannot protest. And the other sage, Rabbi Ilya, holds that we do not coerce, and so this guy can make that protest. Now the Gemara rejects that this is what we're talking about. No. Everyone agrees that there is coercion concerning conduct characteristic of Sodom, and it is different here, as according to the opinion of Rabbi Ilya, this is not conduct characteristic of Sodom, as the neighbor can say to the one who constructed the window, yeah, it's high up in your house and you can't see down into my courtyard, but there are times when you will place a bench beneath yourself, and then you can stand and see into my home. You might put a step stool or a chair or a chest of drawers under that window, and for whatever reason, you might climb up and then look through that window down into the courtyard and invade my privacy, and that's why I don't want you to have that window. Therefore, I can protest. And the Gemara relates that there was a certain individual who came before Rabbi Ami and presented this precise scenario. And Rabbi Ami sent him before Rabbi Abba bar Memel to ask for a ruling. And Rabbi Abba bar Memel said to him, act in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Ilya. Now, since the Mishna cited a dispute with regard to the conditions under which an owner has acquired the privilege to use a window, the Gemara teaches that Shmuel says, and if a window was built for the purpose of enabling light to enter a dark room, then the owner of the window has the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, whatever size it is, and not only if it is a large window. And if the neighbor did not protest its construction, he cannot subsequently force the owner of the window to seal it. Not later, but sounds like he can protest when it's built, even though it's only going to provide light. So that seems to be, according to that argument, of putting the step stool there. But if he didn't object at that time, then the guy with the window will acquire that privilege. And that completes our discussion of Mishnah number 7 here in chapter 3. Now, Mishnah number 8. With regard to a projection emerging from the wall of one's house. It's this projection, right? We've been talking about this projection a few times. It's really like a terrace, some kind of a balcony that extends. Now, it might be a very small balcony. And in fact, I'll tell you, you see these days kind of modern, high-tech residential buildings sometimes do have these tiny little terraces that you can barely put a chair there. But you can at least, step out of your house, stand outside, maybe smoke a cigarette. There's really only room for 1 or 2 people to stand there, not even to sit. There are such projections. So what about that? With regard to a projection emerging from the wall of one's house and overhanging a courtyard, so one has the means to establish an acquired privilege for its use if it protrudes at least as far as a handbreadth, very small terrace. And the owner of the courtyard can protest its construction, meaning that if he doesn't protest, then the guy can have that projection out there, even though it's going to sort of allow him to be outside or to place things outside or hang things from this projection over the courtyard. Now, if it protrudes less than a handbreadth, then the owner of the house has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, and the owner of the courtyard cannot protest its construction. He can't protest that it's been built, but because there's no acquired privilege of using it, he could build in front of it and render it a useless projection because it's such an insignificant projection to begin with. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara, and we are on page 59b. Rabbi Asi says that Rabbi Mani says, and some say that Rabbi Yaakov says that Rabbi Mani says, if one established an acquired privilege with regard to a projection of a handbreadth, he has established an acquired privilege with regard to 4 handbreadths. Once you allow this little projection and the neighbor doesn't object, then you could extend the projection a little bit. Not a lot, but 4 handbreadths, and make it the kind of projection that you could actually stand there and put a railing around. And the Gemara asks, what is he saying? And Abaye said that this is what he's saying. If one established an acquired privilege with regard to a projection that measures 1 handbreadth wide by 4 handbreadths long, he has established an acquired privilege with regard to extending the projection to a width of 4 handbreadths. Once you have a little projection over the courtyard and the neighbor doesn't object, you can widen it out just a little bit. It's not like you can take advantage of this, but it can at least become a significant space. What's significant? 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths. I mean, again, it's not like such a big thing, kind of 16 inches by 16 inches. Now, the Mishnah teaches that if the projection protrudes less than a handbreadth, so the owner of the house has no means to establish an acquired privilege for its use, and the owner of the courtyard of the roof cannot protest the actions of the owner of the courtyard, i.e. he may not demand that the owner of the courtyard refrain from construction that interferes with the former's use of the projection. But the owner of the courtyard can protest the actions of the owner of the roof and demand that the latter not build a projection of any size, even less than a handbreadth. And he can also demand that the owner of the roof not use an existing projection, since it leads to damage caused by sight. And again, looking in, invasion of privacy. And Rav Yehuda says even the owner of the courtyard cannot protest the actions of the owner of the roof. What's the problem with the roof? The roof looks down on the courtyard, so he has the advantage of looking down, and that's the much more invasive perspective than looking up. Now the Gemara suggests, shall we say that they disagree with regard to the issue of damage caused by sight? Is that actual damage or not? One sage, Rav Huna, holds that damage caused by sight, meaning invasion of privacy by looking into the courtyard or looking into the neighbor's windows, this is considered damage. And therefore, the owner of the courtyard can protest that this owner of the roof has built in a projection that gives him a greater vantage than he had before over the courtyard. Since the owner of the roof has the means to see into the other person's courtyard when using this projection. And the other sage, Rav Yehuda, holds that sight, damage by sight is not actually damage. But the Gemara rejects this. No, everyone agrees that damage caused by having a line of sight into someone's property is in fact considered damage. And Rav Yehuda holds it is different here, as the owner of the roof can say to the owner of the courtyard, the projection is not suitable for use since it is too small for me to stand upon and look into the courtyard. For what purpose is it suitable? Just to hang items on it and nothing more. I will turn my face away and hang items on it without looking into your courtyard. This is a little shelf that I've extended out of my wall, below my window or above my window, just so that I can hang some things on it like a clothesline. I'm not going to use it to invade your privacy. And therefore, what does this have to do with line of sight? I'm not going to invade your privacy. It's too small to be used that way. But the other Amora, Rav Huna, holds that the owner of the courtyard can say to the owner of the roof, well, there may be times when you are frightened due to the height of the projection, and you will look into my courtyard while you are using it. Okay, that's not your intent to invade my privacy, but it's going to make it a little easier for you to invade my privacy, and I don't want it. And so he can object. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 8. Now, Mishnah number 9 here in chapter 3. A person may not open his windows, i.e., build an opening. It's not, open the glass or open the shutters, meaning not create a window. A person may not create a window in his wall that faces a courtyard belonging to partners. In other words, they co-own the courtyard. It's not that there's the owner of the house that looks down on a courtyard that's owned by someone else. These guys co-own the courtyard. And nevertheless, the one whose wall faces that courtyard cannot create a new window unless he gets permission from his partner. Now, if one of the partners purchased a house in another adjacent courtyard, so he may not open the house into a courtyard belonging to partners. If he built a loft on top of his house, he may not open it into a courtyard belonging to partners. Rather, if he desired to build a loft, he may build a room within his house, or he may build a loft on top of his house and open it into his house, not directly into the courtyard. So in other words, let's say that there are 4 houses that surround the courtyard. 2 of them have openings into the courtyard, so those 2 are the partners in the courtyard, and the other 2 actually they don't open into that courtyard. Those houses open into some other courtyard. You can kind of imagine that it's set up that way. And then one of the partners purchases this this third house that simply has a wall on the courtyard. And now, so he's got 2 houses that face the courtyard. The one he lives in, has a door into the courtyard. The other one that he just bought doesn't have a door into that courtyard. So he says to himself, well, I'll build a door into this courtyard. After all, it's my courtyard. I co-own it with someone else, but I have ownership over this courtyard. And now that I've bought another house that has a wall on that courtyard, I want both of my houses to have doors onto the courtyard. This Mishnah is telling us he cannot build that door unless he gets permission from his partner. Why? Because now this other house that didn't have traffic in the courtyard, right? Its door faced some other direction. now will add to the traffic of the courtyard. That is an inconvenience for the partner, and even though he has ownership in that courtyard, he'll have to get permission from his partner before he can open a door that will create more traffic in the courtyard. Now the Gemara, with regard to the Mishna's ruling that one may not open a window into a courtyard that he co-owns, the Gemara asks, why did the Mishnah specifically render it prohibited for one to open a window into a courtyard, to create a window into a courtyard belonging to partners? One may not open a window into another's courtyard either, as it will lead to damage caused by sight. So the Gemara replies that the Mishnah is speaking utilizing the style of, it is not necessary, like this. It is not necessary to say that it is not permitted for one to open a window into a courtyard that belongs to someone else, where he is certainly not allowed to look. But where one wants to open create a window into a courtyard belonging to partners, where he's one of the partners, where the owner of the window can say to the other partner, well, ultimately, since you need to conceal yourself from me and conduct yourself modestly in the courtyard where I too am a partner in owning it, and I have the right to be present, so why would it bother you if I open a window there? In other words, we already co-own the courtyard, so how much of an expectation of privacy you have? Already, we both share the courtyard, so why would me opening an additional window into that courtyard interfere with your privacy if you already have your privacy reduced by the fact that you and I co-own the courtyard? So therefore, I should be able to open the window even without your permission. You might have thought that. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us that the partner may say to him, well, until now, I needed to conceal myself from you only when we were both in the courtyard. Now I will need to conceal myself from you even when you are in the house, as you can see into the court. Now I will need to conceal myself from you even when I'm in the house, as you can see into my house from your window. So what he was saying is, before I only needed to conceal myself, I only needed to act modestly when I saw you in the courtyard because you could look into my house. But if you weren't in the courtyard, then I would think I have privacy in my house. Now that you're going to have a window in your house looking into the courtyard, you'll also be able to see through that window into my house, and that affects my privacy. Now the sages taught in the Baraisa there was an incident involving a person who opened his windows into a courtyard, or created a window, multiple windows into a courtyard belonging to partners. He was one of the partners. And he came before Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yosef, who said to him, you have established an acquired privilege, my son. You have established an acquired privilege, and you may not be prevented from using the windows. In other words, you built the window into a courtyard that you co-owned with another partner. He did not object. So now you've acquired the privilege of keeping that window. Does that work? But then I guess his partner took the case before Rabbi Chia, who said to the first partner, well, you toiled and opened the windows. Now you must toil and seal them, as the partners have the right to prevent you from using these windows. In other words, even though they didn't object when you built it, the fact is it's an ongoing invasion of privacy, and you did not acquire a privilege to keep doing that. And now, since they do object, you have to seal up the window. So Rav Nachman said, now we're at the top of page 60a, and to seal, i.e., if one sealed another person's window in his presence, there is an acquired privilege established immediately to keep the window sealed. Now, this is interesting. So now you have two partners that co-own a courtyard, and let's say that one of them has a window into the courtyard, the other one maybe does, let's say he doesn't. Okay, so only one of them has a window into the courtyard. And it's been that way for a while. And then the one who doesn't have a window says, you know what, I don't have a window into the courtyard. I don't have the ability to look into the courtyard. You shouldn't either, because you're interfering with my privacy. And so then this guy seals up the window of the other guy. He actually takes it upon himself to seal the window. Can he do that? Didn't the other one already have an acquired privilege of keeping that window open? Answer, no, because it's an ongoing invasion of privacy and you cannot acquire that privilege. Now, this is presumably that he didn't give permission in the beginning. Now, this is the status quo the way it was. Maybe permission doesn't even matter. So, right, according to this, says Rav Nachman, if one sealed up his neighbor's window in his presence, right? So you didn't just, you did the work, but you did it with him watching you. So there was a tacit approval that you could seal up his window so that he wouldn't look into your courtyard or your house. Since you did it in his presence, then you have acquired the privilege of sealing his window so he can't look at you. Right? And why is this? To seal. If one sealed another person's window in his presence, then there is an acquired privilege established immediately to keep the window sealed. Why? As it is not common behavior for a person to have his source of light sealed in his presence and remain silent. The fact that he did not immediately protest indicates that the one who sealed the window had the legal right to do so unilaterally, or that the owner of the window agreed. So the permission aspect is part of it. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. So the Mishnah teaches that if one purchased a house in another adjacent courtyard, he may not open the house into a courtyard belonging to partners. You can't add a door into the courtyard for this new house that you bought. And the Gemara explains what is the reason for this? Because by adding residents to the courtyard, it increases their traffic. And the residents of the courtyard do not wish to be disturbed by additional people passing through. Now the Gemara questions this, but say that the last clause of the Mishnah, where it said, rather, if he desired to build a loft, he may build a room within his house, or he may build a loft above his house and have it open into his house, not directly into the courtyard. But if he does so, isn't there still a concern that it increases the traffic? Okay, you can't open a door from this other house that you bought. Now there's be an additional entranceway into the courtyard because there's going to be more people coming through there. But if you just bring more people to live inside your house, isn't that going to add to the traffic of the courtyard? Yeah, it will. But it's your business how many people live in your house. That's a risk that anyone undertakes when they share a courtyard with someone else, that he might have more, he might bring his in-laws to live in that house. Okay, there's going to be more people. But adding a whole other house worth of people, not okay. And this continues. Rav Huna said, as an explanation, what does the Mishnah mean when it says that he may build a room? It means that he may divide an existing room in two. And what is the loft to which the Mishnah is referring? It is an internal story created by dividing an existing space into two stories. But actually the law is you can add to your house, which will enable more people to live there. That's your business. But you can't add additional entrances into the courtyard without the permission of your partner in owning that courtyard. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 9 here in chapter 3 of Tractate Bava Basra. Tomorrow, God willing, we'll pick it up on page 60a with Mishnah number 10. Seeing just one question from Joseph. I've always wondered why our Western legal system does not keep this law about cities of refuge instead of incarceration for relevant cases. I mean, remember that in terms of cities of refuge, we're really just talking about, negligent homicide, and even the negligence is questionable. If it's true negligence, it wouldn't even qualify for the city of refuge. That's much closer to murder. It's kind of like accidental, but maybe there was some negligence involved. Other kinds of crimes, that's not what this is about. Right, but it's really to sort of preclude a Hatfields and McCoys type of situation. I mean, what's really interesting about that law to me, I was talking about this last night, is, well, this assumes that there is an avenger of blood. Now, is the avenger of blood who's expected to follow the law and not take out, that vengeance on behalf of the family when the one who, escaped, shall we say, and made it to the city of refuge. So once he's in the city of refuge, he's protected. But if he leaves the city of refuge, even one block outside the city, then the avenger of blood can kill him. But that's weird because that's an extrajudicial execution, right? There's no trial, there's no witnesses, there's none of that. There's just a very emotional and angry family member. How is that possible? And what are the actual laws of the avenger of blood other than the fact that he cannot take action in the city of refuge? I feel like we need to learn more about those laws. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Sunday, at the regular time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. Good Vach, Shavua Tov.